Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. You know how this works.
Yeah.
You give us the source material.
You got it.
We pull out the key insight and give you that aha moment.
Exactly.
This time,
We're going deep.
we're going deep into a text that has intrigued people for centuries.
Or sure.
It's the Yצירה.
The book of creation.
Some call it that, yeah.
You know, it's really cool because you specifically requested that we look at it from both the straightforward meaning.
Yeah, the Peshat.
Like the Peshat. Yeah, the simple meaning.
Right.
But also
the Kabbalistic interpretation.
the deeper Kabbalistic stuff.
Right, exactly.
Like what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, so just for our listener, we're going to look at both.
For sure.
But no matter what,
we're
always going to root
everything
we say
of course
in the text itself.
Absolutely.
So, chapter 1.
Oh, yeah.
Starts off
Big idea.
with a really big idea.
Right away.
Verse 1 introduces this whole concept of creation through what it calls 32 wondrous paths of wisdom.
Paths of wisdom. Interesting.
And then it lists these three sort of fundamental elements.
Okay.
Sefer, Visami.
Book, number, and narration.
Yeah.
Wow.
So right off the bat, it's a really dense statement.
Fact.
Yeah.
So tell me, what jumps out at you about that?
But the thing that I find interesting is this idea that creation happens through paths of wisdom.
Okay.
It seems like it's a very deliberate process.
Right.
Almost intellectual.
It's not just random.
It's not just like, poof.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's thought out.
Right. And then when you think about book, number, narration, it's like the universe was created with the tools that we use to describe it and understand it.
It makes you wonder if those things are connected.
Right, like is the way that we know things somehow related to the way the reality is structured.
Yeah, is there a link there?
Yeah. Very interesting.
And you mentioned that there's an alternative reading to this verse.
Yeah, there's another way that this verse can begin.
Yeah.
Instead of talking about those paths of wisdom, it actually starts by naming God.
Right.
With a bunch of different attributes.
Right.
It says, God of Israel, living God, King of the universe, merciful and gracious God, who dwells forever and whose name is holy.
Wow.
So, right away, we're emphasizing this is something really holy, really powerful.
Right.
We're talking about the source of everything.
Right.
And the way that it's worded, it really sets the stage for like, this is serious stuff.
Right. This is not to be taken lightly.
Exactly.
Right. So then we get to verse 2.
Okay.
And it introduces the 10 Sephiro.
Without substance.
Isis for abeliма. Isis for abelimisapro. Without anything.
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like
contradiction.
Yeah, how can something be so important but have no substance?
Right.
So the way I understand it is think of these Sephiro not as physical things, but more like fundamental principles or forces that structure reality.
Right.
The text gives us an analogy. It says, think about your 10 fingers, 5 against 5. And then there's a covenant in the middle formed by your speech and your breath.
Right.
So it's like there's this connection between these different forces that's created by expression.
Yeah, by the word.
Yeah, by the word and the breath. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really clear image.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because then verse 3 really emphasizes that it's 10, not 9, not 11.
No more, no less.
Right, and that we need to understand in wisdom and be wise in understanding.
It really stresses the importance of thinking about it deeply. It's not just about like passively receiving this information.
It's an active thing.
Right.
You got to wrestle with these ideas.
Yeah, we really have to engage. And I've noticed that there are all these slight variations.
Oh, yeah.
In the way that different versions of the text phrase this, like know and consider.
Right.
Return and consider. Examine, know, and consider them.
Yeah, like they're all getting at the same thing.
Right. It's all very intellectual work.
Absolutely.
Right. And then verse 4 kind of broadens the scope by saying that these 10 Sephiros have 10 measures.
10 measures?
Without end.
Oh, wow.
And that they represent all these different polarities that we experience.
Yeah.
So beginning and end.
Right.
Good and evil. Height and depth.
Up and down.
All the directions.
Oh, wow. So it's like they contain everything.
And it says that. There's a single master.
A single master.
Controlling it all.
So there's unity.
Yeah, there's
unity
in the diversity.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's almost like saying that. These principles aren't limited.
Yeah.
They represent the full spectrum of existence.
The whole framework of reality.
And it's so interesting how it grounds these abstract ideas in things like directions, which we can understand.
Exactly. It gives us a way to kind of grasp what they're doing.
And then verse 5 gives us this really dynamic picture by saying that. The Sifero appear like a flash of lightning.
Oh, wow.
That they're limitless. And that they have this movement of ratso visha.
Going forth and returning.
Right.
That's interesting.
All in obedience to God's command.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful image.
So what do you make of that ratso vishav?
Well, I think the ratso vishav really is key here. Yeah. Because it gives us this idea of this flow of divine energy or influence. Right. And it's this constant
give and take.
Yeah, ebb and flow. And the lightning, it's both like
the suddenness.
The brilliance.
Right. The power. And then it ends by saying, before his throne, they prostrate themselves.
Yeah, they're totally subservient.
So it really emphasizes their subservience to the Creator.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and then verse 6 reiterates that they're limitless and that they have this cyclical nature where the end is connected to the beginning.
Oh, wow.
And it gives this analogy of a flame bound to a burning coal.
Oh, that's a good way.
Show how they're connected.
So vivid.
Right. And then it asks this question.
Okay.
Before one, what can you count?
Yeah. Before one, what can you count? I think that question is really important because it points to that there's this underlying unity to all this diversity.
Yeah. When you get back to that. One, that source it.
Yeah.
Dissolves.
Right. The counting doesn't even make sense anymore.
Right. And then verse 7 issues this warning. A warning.
Yeah. It says to guard our mouth from speaking.
And our heart.
And our heart. From pondering excessively.
Believing too much.
And it references that ratso vichov.
Oh, wow.
In the covenant.
So it's connecting those ideas.
Why, do you think?
Yeah, why the warning?
That's there.
That's a good question. I think what it's suggesting is there are limits to what we can understand with our finite minds.
Right, like our minds can only grasp so much.
Exactly, and this ratso vishav might be suggesting this infinite process.
Right, that we can't possibly.
Yeah, wrap our heads around. Yeah. And maybe if we speculate too much without the right kind of inner preparation, it could even be harmful. Like we could go astray.
Right, and the covenant, I think you're right. It's a reminder that real understanding comes through that connection.
Right, through connection to the source.
Yeah, not just through endless analysis.
Not just head nod.
Right. So then verses 8 through 11 start to describe the first 4 Sephiro specifically. Okay. So the first one is the Spirit of the living God.
Okay.
Which it also calls the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit, wow.
And it associates this with kol, ruach, vidubur.
Voice, spirit, and speech. So right away, we see this connection.
Yeah, to the creative power of speech.
Exactly, like the word brings things into being.
And it says that its beginning is unfathomable and its limit is endless.
It's beyond our understanding.
Just really primordial and transcendent.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
The second Sephiro is spirit from spirit.
Spirit from spirit, okay.
And it's through this that the 22 foundational letters were formed.
Oh, wow.
Along with the 4 cardinal directions.
So the building blocks of language and space.
So it's almost like second Sephiro.
Yeah.
Is where that pure potential starts to take on a more defined shape.
Right. There's a structure there.
Yeah. And then the third Sephira is water from spirit.
Water from spirit.
And this is used to create tohu.
Tohu and vohu.
Tohu and vohu.
And mire and clay.
Okay. So these are interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that these seemingly negative or undefined states are part of the creation process.
Yeah, it's not all just like perfect right away.
Right. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's important to remember that tohu and vohu aren't just nothing. They're more like unformed potential.
Right.
like the raw material.
The primordial goo.
Yeah, exactly. And it talks about a garden bed being formed and enclosed.
So there's a sense of like shaping.
Shaping. And then it talks about this transformation into dust or ash.
And there's a quote there. For to the snow, he says, be earth.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because you mentioned some alternative interpretation of tohu and vohu.
Right. Well, some people see tohu as like a green line encircling the world.
Oh, well.
And vohu as these smooth stones from which water emanates.
Right.
There's a verse that says, and he shall stretch over it the line of formlessness and the stones of emptiness.
Wow. So that's a much more vivid, almost mythical picture.
It's like a different way of trying to grasp these abstract ideas.
Right. And it shows that even back in, people were thinking about these things in really creative ways.
Absolutely.
And then the fourth sephira is fire from water.
Fire from water.
Wow. And this gives rise to all the hosts of heaven.
Oh, wow.
The throne of glory. Theophanim, the seraphim, the holy creatures, and ministering angels.
So this is the realm.
It's like, this is where
of spiritual activity.
Yeah, all the action is happening. And it's so powerful that the divine dwelling itself is founded on these three.
Yeah, spirit, water, and fire. It's like the foundation.
And then there's that little...
and not from his great fire, lest they be likened to consuming fire.
Oh, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, so saying that even the most intense... divine manifestations are still mediated.
They're tempered. It's not just raw fire.
Right. And then verses 12 and 13 talk about sealing the heights with YHVH.
YHVH, okay.
And the depths with YVH. And also the 6 directions with variations like HYV, HVY, HYVYH.
BVY, right?
Yeah, it's almost like these names represent specific energetic configurations that establish the very structure of the cosmos.
Yeah, like a blueprint based on these names.
Right. So it's a lot to unpack. And then verse 14 just sums it all up.
Okay.
Brings us back to that. Order, spirit of the living God.
Right.
Spirit from spirit, water from spirit, fire from water, and then the 6 directions.
So it's like a review.
Right.
Okay.
So chapter 1 really lays the foundation.
The groundwork.
For Sectra, these core ideas. And then chapter 2 shifts gears a little bit to the 22 foundational letters.
22 foundational letters.
Right. So now we're looking at the building blocks of language.
Yeah.
But also all of creation.
Oh, wow.
And it divides them into 3 mothers.
Emesh.
7 doubles.
Bejeg Kafar.
Right. And 12 simples.
He, Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud, Lamed, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Zadi, Kuf.
Yeah. So verse 2 explains that these 3 mothers are the origins of heaven, which is fire, water, and air,
which is spirit.
Spirit, with spirit being the decisive force.
Balancing force.
Right in between. So we see that. These letters are linked to the elemental forces.
Back to the Sephirah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then verse 3 talks about the characteristics of these mother letters. So mem.
Mem is silent.
Silent. Shin is hissing.
Shin is the hissing sound.
Right. And aleph.
And aleph is that force in between.
Yeah.
That decisive force.
So they each have their own unique quality and function.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And then verse 4 gives us another way to think about them by comparing them to a scale.
Oh, a scale?
With a pan of merit.
A pan of merit?
A pan of liability.
A pan of liability?
And the tongue as the decisive force.
The tongue decides.
Right. So that introduces this really interesting ethical dimension.
In an ethical dimension.
Okay.
So it's not just about like forming words.
Right. It's about judgment and balance.
Right. Like there's a moral aspect.
And then verse 5 describes all the things that you can do with these common 2 letters.
What can we do?
So you can engrave them.
Right.
Carve them, weigh them.
Combine them.
Transpose them, and use them to form the soul of every creature and everything destined to be formed.
So it's like they're active.
Yeah, they're not just like symbols on a page.
Yeah, they're not passive.
Yeah, they're like forces in the act of creation.
They have power.
And then verse 6 gets into the more physical aspect. And talks about how these 22 letters are formed in 5 different places.
5 places.
In the mouth.
In the mouth.
So you have the gutturals.
Okay.
the labials, the dentals, the sibilants, and the palatals.
Wow. So it's like
grounding.
It's connecting it to human speech.
In our own physical embodiment.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then verse 7
okay.
introduces this idea that these letters are fixed within. A sphere.
A sphere.
With 231 gates.
231 gates.
Barrel ashirim.
Barrel ashirim. Oh.
And this sphere.
Yeah.
Can revolve forward and backward.
It can go both ways.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it says there's no good higher than one neg.
One neg.
And no evil lower than neg.
Yeah. So it's like there's this defined framework for everything.
Right. Within this sphere.
And then verse 8 explains how these 231 gates come about.
Okay.
Through weighing and transposing the letters.
Weighing and transposing. How does that work?
So you take aleph. And you combine it with all the other letters.
Okay.
Then you take bet. And you can combine it
all the other letters.
With all the other. And so on. That's how you get these 231 different combinations.
Oh, we see.
And it says that from this process comes all speech and all of creation.
Wow.
Ultimately stemming from one single name.
One single name.
So it's kind of like saying that, you know, from a limited set of ingredients, you can create infinite variety.
It's like cooking.
Exactly.
You have your basic spices and you can make endless dishes.
Right. And then verse 9 talks about creating substance from nothingness.
Substance from nothing.
And forming. Yeah. Great pillars from intangible air.
Wow.
So it's really emphasizing
that miraculous nature of creation.
Yeah.
That from what seems like nothing comes tangible reality.
Absolutely. And then for verse 10. Verse 10 gets really